You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Do you want to experience the thrill of a Packers game at Lambeau Field? If so, be sure to get your guaranteed authentic tickets from theticketking.com, a longtime trusted source and local Green Bay business. Just go to packerstalk.com/tickets for more information and ticket links. That's packerstalk.com/tickets.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Miles Teddick, joined co-host Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans, and we love talking about the Pack. What can we say? We're not getting into the national sports media talking points and all the nonsense headlines that they like to get into. We're getting into real football. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week and breaking down the games during the season and sorting through all the drama and the rumors of the offseason, which we are now at the beginning of. At least for us. How you doing this evening, Tim? Doing good, man?
Doing better than I was last week. You know, another week out from season ending, so starting to get into that flow, I guess, of the off season and trying to figure out who the next defensive coordinator is going to be. But yeah, feeling a little better this week. But after watching those games yesterday, it still sucks. It still hurts, you know, knowing that the Packers should have been playing for the championship.
Yeah, man. Well, we're gonna get into some reactions from this weekend, and Tim, you're cutting out a little bit there, so apologize for the choppy stream. It'll get going though; it usually smooths out after the first few minutes, so hang with us. But we're gonna dive into some of that. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials. Subscribe on the Packers Talk Network YouTube channel, and those things make a huge difference for us and only take a split second for you. So thank y'all. And just welcome this evening. We're going to do some reactions. We're also going to do some remembering of the 2023 season here before we close things out entirely. And then on the second half of this evening's episode, we're going to get into some draft stuff. Not too deep, but you know, we're going to start to scratch the surface a little bit about what might lie ahead for building the 2024 Packers team, man. But let's start off with that NFC Championship game. So did the Niners win that thing, man, or did the Lions lose? How do you look at that?
Oh, the Lions choked that away. I mean, credit to San Francisco. You still have to make the plays, and they did in the second half, but the Lions gave that game away. They should have won that going away 24-7. You know, I didn't think it was over, but it was damn close to being over. And it kind of felt like one more score and that was it. I mean, the Lions were dominating the game and they gave it away in multiple ways, you know, and it kind of felt like, man, now you see what it's like in the playoffs when you blow a game that you shouldn't lose. Lions fans, like, welcome to our pain as Packers fans, finding every imaginable way to lose a playoff game. We've been there way too many times. Yeah, it was there for the Lions to win, and there's no way they should have lost it, whether it was the questionable decisions on fourth down, the bad clock management by Dan Campbell, especially in the last drive for the Lions, wasting a timeout that he couldn't afford to waste. Drop passes that would have converted a fourth down, another one that would have converted a third down, and then just, I don't know what you can do about it, but just that fluky pass that hits a Lions cornerback in the face mask, goes up in the air, and Brandon Ayuk catches it, and that kind of like started the snowball rolling down the hill for the Lions. But yeah, they absolutely gave it away. The Niners, you know, to their credit, they had to play very well in the second half. Their defense almost pitched a second half shutout. They didn't give up anything until that late touchdown that they gave up when they were already up 10 points. But the Lions handed that game to them and completely blew their best chance that they've ever had to reach a Super Bowl. So yeah, that was a total Lions choke job.
Yeah, man, this is brutal. And I was I gotta say, even in the second, Lions were really looking like they had control of it. I was like, this game is just not over. That feeling was always there, that the game was just not over, and that, on Twitter I posted, that the Niners are like Michael Myers, man. You just can't kill them. You can't make them go away. It does do. Oh, here I am. It doesn't matter what you do. You can't run fast enough, I think is what I said to Lions fans. It just felt inevitable. The Niners just felt like they were never going to be dead. It felt like you couldn't do enough to keep your foot on their throat and keep them out of that game. And that's what happened, man. And I feel for Lions fans. My heart goes out to you guys because that's just a tough way to lose. It's a tough way to get so far. After being a fan for so long, you guys have gone through 30 years of misery, pretty much, like drastic disappointment. That really is too bad. I really feel for Lions fans, and the Niners are the bully of the NFC, man. Until they're not, somebody's going to knock them off. They are until they're not. So it's too bad we couldn't see a change in that this year, but it is what it is. Let me ask you this.
They look very vulnerable, though. I mean,
Go
this
ahead.
is two games that they could have easily lost, and they should have lost the Packers game. They should have lost the Lions game. So it's not like they've even come close to like dominating or controlling either game. They've needed a lot of crazy bounces to go their way, and the other teams just blowing opportunities for them to win. So they're vulnerable. And yeah, I mean, I thought all year they were the best team in the NFC, but definitely thought they were better than they've performed the last 2 weeks. And I kind of, watching them the last 2 weeks in the playoffs, saying, yeah, they won, and that's all that matters. But they're vulnerable, and they don't look that good. They don't really impress me that much. There's definitely, weak points, but they're in the Super Bowl, so it doesn't really matter because they got one more game to win. But yeah, I mean, to their credit, they've survived and advanced, and that's really what it's about right now.
Yeah. I mean, winning is winning, right?
Yeah, especially in the playoffs. No matter how you do it, it doesn't matter what it looks like or, how you got there. Just win.
That's all that matters, man. So and now let's shift gears a little bit into the other game from this weekend. We're not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but same thing. Chiefs win, Ravens lose.
Chiefs
what do you
win.
think it was? Chiefs win?
Yeah, I think it was Chiefs win. I mean, their defense was excellent the whole way through. The offense, I thought, for the Chiefs, they came out really good the first couple drives. It looked like they had like a good, their scripted plays, their early start to the game. They definitely had some things scouted well and some things drawn up for the Ravens defense. But then after those first couple drives, the Ravens defense really played a good game, shut them out in the second half, gave their offense every chance possible to come back and win that game. But Chiefs defensively just closed the door. They had the takeaways in the second half, the big fumble going into the end zone that would have changed that game. But the Chiefs defense has, to me, been the most consistent part of their team all year. And that's why they're this far. And now they're finding ways to win. They're like adapting each week. And that's a credit to the Chiefs. Like, we're so used to them just lighting up the scoreboard and Mahomes putting up all these points. And they didn't do that against the Ravens, and they won. They did it against Buffalo, even though they didn't have the ball for most of that game, but they were able to score and be consistent. But then their defense made big plays, and they dominated Miami. Miami was overmatched in that game, but they're finding different ways to win, and they're almost kind of changing each week. And man, it just Mahomes and Andy Reid in the play, like you can't bet against them. You can't kill them. Like, here they are again, and I know I'm kind of sick of seeing them in the Super Bowl again, but like, all the respect for what they've done. And I mean, like, what are you going to say? They're just that good. And the fact that they're showing they can win with defense now and just like managing the game and getting through it. And I really thought the Ravens kind of like got away from their identity, which was running the ball. They really never tried to run the ball, and they got down early, and they almost played like they were down by like 3 touchdowns or something, where they just started airing it out and was like, no, that's not who you are.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, like it made no sense. They didn't help Lamar Jackson in any way, and then they had a lot of bad penalties with personal foul penalties. That's not again, that's not like them. So I kind of think like maybe the moment got a little too big for the Ravens, and they just ran into the ultimate playoff team, the Chiefs. And it's kind of scary because the Chiefs are kind of reminding me almost like what the Patriots had built all those years, or like however they got to beat you, they're beat you that way. They're figured out, and it doesn't have to be all Patrick Mahomes lighting up the scoreboard. They can beat you other ways. So yeah, I think that game was the Chiefs winning. I think that was more them than the Ravens handing it to them.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of brings me to another question, man. NFL scripted, or are the officials just that bad? Because the scripted narrative is hot and heavy on Twitter right now.
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's Twitter's always coming up with some crazy stuff, but I mean the officials are bad, and I mean I think
They're pretty bad.
we've talked about it like throughout the year, and it's not just Packers games. Like you watch other games, and they miss some things that are obvious, and it's like why do you even have to go to replay on this? Like it's right there in front of, like, what are we missing? And I just think they have to over officiate so many things because the league's changing the rule book, and like what's a catch, what's not a catch, what is roughing the passer, or what's a personal foul, like what's not targeting, that's college, but what's, using your helmet to hit somebody up high. Like it's just so over officiated that I think their jobs are really hard, but at the same time they miss a lot of clear and obvious things. And yeah, the officiating, it's been brutal this year. And, the biggest stage in sports is coming up in 2 weeks. Like, hopefully the officiating's fine. I'd hate to see the Super Bowl decided by, a missed call or just a poorly officiated decision, but it very well could be. And I don't have much confidence in that because I think it's been a tough year. I think it's been a really poorly officiated year. And that's a bigger issue that the NFL really, really needs to look into and figure out in the off season, because it's just so obvious. And yeah, it's week to week you see it, and it's more glaring now in the playoffs because you have fewer games and everybody's watching the same things, but it really sticks out.
Oh, did I lose you there, man?
I think you did, but I hear you now.
Well, and what bums me out is, and it's funny because it shouldn't be this way, but here we are. Yeah. When you talk to people about, like, hey, who are you rooting for in this game? Obviously when the Packers aren't in it or their team's not in it, whatever, like, oh, what are you rooting for? Who are you rooting for? Man, I am always just like, I'm just rooting for a good game. I hope this game doesn't come down to another bad call at the end of the game. That's what I root for. And how sad is that? Another thing I had tweeted is, the NFL, Roger Goodell, and NFL officiating, they should all be embarrassed. It's very obvious what's going on. And there was a time that they would be embarrassed by what, the way that they're conducting themselves. And that's the part to me that really is frustrating, because they're not embarrassed. None of them are. Why would they be, right? They're making millions, right? Yeah, billions.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating to me because there's no way of holding these guys accountable. And you would like to believe that coaches or owners or whoever, you'd like to believe they have some mechanism of holding these guys accountable. And I just don't believe that they do. I mean, we can submit plays for review. Great. I'm sure that goes real far, doesn't it? I'm just sure that does a whole lot of good. And if it did, we would be seeing the results of that by now. And we're not. We see the same terrible officiating game in and game out right now. And it is across the board. Like you're saying, it's not just Packer games. This is all these games. It's every single one of them. And it is so frustrating. I mean, those two calls, there's two just egregious pass interference calls in that game, the Chiefs and the Ravens. And it's just like, man, you know what? I really am not into the idea of the NFL being scripted, because there's so many things that are impossible to script. The Zay Flowers fumble, for example, you're talking about fractions of a second on that ball being a touchdown or, going the other way. There's no way to script a play like that. But when you have officials doing the stuff that they're doing, man, is it hard to sort of not think that something's up, and I lean more towards, what's a classic human issue? It's gambling, right? Vegas is all in NFL. NFL's all in Vegas now. It's real hard to believe that these refs aren't somehow being, incentivized one way or another with some of these calls. And, I'd love to say, oh, that's silly. No way. It can't happen. The purist in me really wants that, but it's just really hard at this point because it's so bad. It's bad.
Yeah, it is. And I think you make a great point. It's the owners and Roger Goodell, they care, but only to a certain point because they're all billionaires. They're just printing money. And there were just, 58 or 59 million people watched the NFC Championship game. They don't care about the officiant unless it screws something up. Like, go back a few years to the Rams Saints. That was an NFC Championship game. The missed pass interference, it was so obvious. And that became, that was the talk of Super Bowl week. That was the talk of the offseason. So they had to change the pass interference rules and all that. That's when they care, is when it's that glaring in a moment where 50 some million people are watching the game. That's when they're going to care because they're reactive. Otherwise, if it's just, week to week, they're missing some calls. Okay, who cares? Everybody's watching, and we are billionaires, rich beyond our wildest dreams, and going to continue that way with the TV contracts they just signed a couple years ago. They don't care. It's going to be once something bad happens. And if it happens in the Super Bowl, then they look bad. And that's when they'll react to it and make some kind of officiating changes or finally make the officials full time so they can get training year round, whatever that would do for it. If that even would solve anything, who knows? But it's going to take something like that to change anything.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't tell me that these guys are missing these blatant defensive pass interference calls at the end of a game like that because they weren't trained right. I don't know. These guys have done way too many games. And the thing is, to be an NFL official, you've got to have officiated all sorts of games before that, right? Like college and high school, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's a ranking thing. That's where it's like, man, yeah, maybe if they were full-time, they would care more, or they would have a little bit more, I don't know, pride in their job. But the way that they are now, these mistakes that they're making, it's hard for me to believe that that's a lack of training, is to explain that. And I think it's a lack of accountability, man. Mm-hmm. It's not hurting the pocketbook. We're living as NFL fans as kind of a macrocosm of what it's like to be a Dallas Cowboys fan, right? Because to solve the problem, you got to stop buying, and you're not going to stop buying. Cowboys fans aren't going to stop buying. NFL fans aren't going to stop buying. So, oh man, well, all fun and good on championship weekend here, but ultimately the Packers weren't in it, so we're not going to waste a lot of our time on it. The Packers season was special. We had fun. Can you agree on that one, Tim? Can you get a little cheers for the 2023 season here?
I don't have a drink, but I'll.
Oh man.
So, yeah,
how do you come on these podcasts without something to wet your whistle, man?
It's late here on the East Coast, man. I can't, And I'm old now.
Well, this is not an alcoholic beverage. I'm actually drinking some coffee. I got to get some work done after this. But I'll toast. I'll do it for both of us. Toast to the Packers 2023 season and the success that we can agree that it was. So let's start there, man. And we'll do this. We've got a few minutes here on this section of the podcast to get into this season before we shift our attention into some draft stuff. But just give me like a kind of a little synopsis, man. What's your quick run over summary of how you will remember the 2023 season?
Yeah, it feels a little weird to say it was successful and they were 9-8. Like in years past, we would be like, that was a hugely disappointing season to finish 9-8, but obviously, like expectations, everything reset this year with the change at quarterback and how young they were on offense. So for me, yeah, it was a successful season because the most important thing was finding out about Jordan Love and finally seeing him play games. And we got that. We got to see that and we got our answer. He's a franchise quarterback and they have another one, like 3 in a row now. And that was the most important thing to find out. And that's what we were hoping for. we also didn't want to be at the other end of it and be sitting here and talking about can they draft a quarterback? Like what are they going to do? We don't have to worry about any of that. Hopefully for another 15 years, like they have their quarterback, and that's makes the season a complete success no matter how many wins they had. The fact that they got to the playoffs was just the icing on the cake and won a playoff game. I mean, it was very disappointing to lose that San Francisco game because they could have won that and there was missed opportunities on their part why they didn't win it. But at the same time, looking back on the season, years from now, when I look back on it, it's going to be all about finally finding out about Jordan Love and seeing him play and taking hold of the quarterback position in Green Bay. That was the most important thing. That's what I think I'm going to remember. And if this goes the way that we're hoping as Packers fans, we're all going to look back and be like, all right, that was the beginning of a new window for this team opening up, getting them back in playoff contention, hopefully Super Bowl contention, and another quarterback in, a long line of 30 some years now of having back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks, now potentially a third one. So that's everything beyond that is just, extra. It's just more for us to talk about. It all was about Jordan Love, and we have that answer now.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about it, man. And I couldn't agree more. And we started this podcast at the front of this season, so it's sort of interesting that our first year as a podcast would be Jordan Love's first starting year. It's just hard not to call it a success, right? You got your guy here in Jordan Love, and not only that, you went into the playoffs, you won a playoff game, you lost a playoff game. I think there's a lot of value in that, and I think the timing of that is different, right? When it's a closing window, it's a lot more disappointing and probably a little less value that comes from that. But in an opening window, a playoff loss can be fuel for an entire offseason. So I think that, it was a great success. I was just as a fan, man, I had fun this season. And, I don't remember having this much fun in Aaron Rodgers' first season back in 2008.
No.
That was a while ago now, so maybe I did. I've slept since then. But
it wasn't as good.
Well, no, obviously. Six wins versus 9. No playoffs. Yeah, there's a lot more to be excited about this season, a lot more to enjoy about it. But, the opening window and what it represents, I think, is just, that's the real piece. And then for me, it's exciting to see the playmakers on the offensive side of the ball that have emerged. And we'll get into this as we shift our attention on the draft side, but Goot finding a stud receiver in the 4th round last year and then in the 5th round this year and Dobbs and Wicks, and not to mention, the second rounders that we kind of expect to take off at this point. They've been so good at drafting second round receivers. But man, finding guys in the 4th and 5th round back-to-back years like that, I think is that's a championship move, man. And if you go back and you analyze some of these championship teams, Super Bowl teams, and what they've been able to do in the draft before leading up to that Super Bowl championship is there's a lot to be learned from that. And a lot of times it's finding these gems later on, these guys that you didn't have to waste. I shouldn't say waste. Use precious capital on first round picks or high salary cap figures in free agency and stuff like that. When you can find these guys, these diamonds in the rough, it just gives you so much more of an advantage and a level up. And I had this conversation with a Cowboys fan not long ago. Or I guess it was a couple years now ago, because this was when their secondary was just terrible. They couldn't find a turnover to save their lives. And I remember him saying, man, Green Bay, you guys find guys at the end of the draft. The Cowboys never do that. And I was just thinking, like, yeah, you're right. But part of that is developing and coaching. And, lo and behold, look at the coaching that they attracted down there and the DB factory it's created. But, what they've done at receiver over the last couple of years, I think, is really, really, really cool and impressive and fun and exciting. And I think we'll look back on it in hindsight with even more excitement than we have now. Because right now, there's a lot that's still unknown. one season with a lot of these guys, two with most, and so yeah, there's a lot left to be discovered, but a lot to be excited about. Obviously, the tight ends both look really good and fit in well. So, all in all, just the young talent on this team is bursting, and I think it's way more than what any of us saw coming at the beginning of this season. And I don't remember anybody raving about Carl Brooks. Like he's going to be one of the guys that makes this season special or anything like that. And, it's funny how a first-round pick like Van Ness can sort of fall back into the crowd when the rest of these guys are actually playing up. It wasn't even that he had a disappointing season as a first-rounder. He actually had a pretty good season as a first-rounder. But everybody around him, the Carl Brooks, the Colby Woodens, the guys on offense, all these guys, it's very exciting. Even Valentine at corner. So I got a little long-winded there, but all in all, I had a great time in this 2023 season. So much to be excited about, and let's jump into it, man. Let's dissect it a little bit. Let's go a little further into what made this season special and start it off. I mean, what was your biggest surprise this season, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just how the offense eventually came together. It took some time, and there were a lot of bumps in the road. And I don't want to say it was maybe surprise isn't that good of a word for it, because we knew they had the talent, and we talked about it, even before the season started, just seeing these guys on the field, preseason games, like the talent was there. But then there were so many ups and downs and, mistakes all over. The offensive line struggled for a while. The receivers were struggling. The quarterback was struggling. They had no running game. Everything was kind of a mess. And they were sitting there at 2-5, and we were having conversations about, where's this headed? Like, are we going to have to start talking about Matt LaFleur's job at the end of the year? And that sounds crazy now. And maybe we were, way too far ahead of it and too emotional on it. But I don't know. So a lot of other people saying the same thing at 2-5, like, this ain't looking very good. Like, we gotta start seeing something different, or a lot of heads are going to roll at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And so was never expecting at that point for them to make the playoffs and win a playoff game and be, a quarter away from going to the NFC Championship game. Like, that was so far from my thoughts. It was just like, can they just win a game? Can they just play one consistent half of football on offense and like carry something over game to game? So I guess overall, the biggest surprise is just where they went from 2-5 to the end of the year and the jump that they made. And it was finally, and there's still ups and downs, but I think finally by December, you saw the receivers become more consistent. You saw them start to stabilize the offensive line a little more, and things improved. Obviously, Jordan Love, from the middle of the season on, took a huge step, and he was the one factor on offense that was consistent week to week from the middle of the season on. But you saw the guys around him start to kind of learn the NFL, and they had to learn it real fast because there were rookies and second-year guys, and it's so much different than the college game. But they all grew together, and that was the biggest and best surprise for me, is just the potential that they are showing for the future, and then just what they were able to bring to the team this season. And they were able to carry them because they had to carry them offensively, which I'll get to in a second. But just the progress that they made throughout the year, that was the biggest and best surprise for me, is just the overall youth of the offense coming together and gelling as the season went on.
Yeah, for me, I think it was just the young talent. I kind of just gushed about it. But coming into this season, let us not forget, and you just said that maybe we were a little out of line in questioning LaFleur's job. Let's not forget that there was plenty of question about Goot, the GM, Brian Gutekunst, coming into this season. Even Pat McAfee, right? Is this guy even smart, right? It was something along the lines that he says, is this guy even smart? Meanwhile, the Jets GM is the best in the league, right? And then we see how that played out. But I always felt like Goot was a pretty damn good GM. He definitely had some misses. Everybody does. But and I did not see him hitting on these last two drafts like he did. Again, we'll get into these things. I want to go back and dive deep and really look at how many other GMs have had a back-to-back draft like he had, because it seems kind of rare to me. But overall, man, the young talent, the way that they just burst out, was awesome. It was shocking, but it was so much fun seeing these guys play so well. So that's what it was for me. And you'd like to say that Jordan Love was the biggest surprise. I don't think he was the biggest surprise. Certainly him playing as well as he did was a surprise, but I think collectively, just the way that for offense and defense, the way that the young talent burst out for me was it was awesome. It was shocking, very surprising. I kind of expected a little bit more of a wade into the waters, and these guys jumped right in, and obviously they didn't start great, right? We started 2-5, but we're talking about this as a whole season now. So that's what the biggest surprise for me would have been. Excuse me. Now, is that the one? I don't know if I want to go there yet. Let's go with this next one. What was most improved? Maybe it was a player, position, coach?
Yeah, I think so. From beginning of the season to the end, I think as a position, the receivers improved the most. Just because we started at the beginning of the year, there were drops. They were running the wrong routes. They were running into each other. There were just so many mental and physical errors. As the season went on, there were fewer and fewer of that, and we finally saw guys just using their athletic ability, thinking less, and just having things come more naturally to them. Maybe the game's slowing down, and some of these guys like Wicks and Reed, Tucker Kraft, his improvement throughout the season was phenomenal. Like, we saw their potential and their abilities take over. So I think as a group, receivers improved the most. But I want to give a shout out to the two offensive tackles who weren't rookies. They were in their second years, Rasheed Walker, Zach Tom. I thought they were the most improved players on the team. Now, like Tom, we saw a lot of that last year as a rookie, but he was moved all around and he didn't really have a stable position. And then even this year, was he gonna compete at center? Was he gonna play guard? Was he gonna move over to left tackle? They put him at right tackle, and he was one of the best right tackles in football this year.
Yeah, he was.
Like, you didn't. And it's always a good compliment for an offensive lineman. We didn't have to talk about Zach Tom much this year because he just did his job quietly and consistently week after week. And there really shouldn't be any talk in the future about should he move to center or left tackle. He's their right tackle, and just don't overthink it and let him play and continue to develop. I thought he was really good this year. And he's a second-year player. Was a fourth-round pick. Another guy they find, another offensive lineman they found in the middle of the draft, like they seem to always hit on.
Yeah.
And then Rasheed Walker, he was kind of like an afterthought. I mean, he was a rookie. He was a seventh-round pick, made the roster, but then they didn't play him all season. He was basically like a red shirt.
Yeah.
They were hiding him on the roster. And then in training camp this year, you start seeing reports like he's playing really well. He's looking good. And they start bumping him up, third team, second team. You're like, okay, maybe they have something here. But you kind of were like, all right, it's good insurance to have, and we were counting on Bakhtiari, and Bakhtiari makes it through one game. And then here's Rasheed Walker starting. And again, like he had his struggles kind of the same time they were 2-5. And that's when he got benched and they went to Yash for a little bit, but Yash couldn't stay healthy and he had his struggles. And then they went to the rotation. And I think from the time they went to the rotation on, and whatever changed for Walker, maybe it was just settling down, going through the benching, being able to correct his mistakes. The rotation maybe helping him that he could play and then sit back and watch someone else play from the sideline and see what was going on and really process the game. Whatever it was that helped him and changed him. From the time of that rotation on, he was really good and was clearly better than Yash. And, by the last few games of the season, they finally let him play all the snaps at left tackle. But he now goes from being this forgotten seventh-round pick a year ago, who knew if he was even going to make the roster coming into training camp this year, right? I mean,
seventh-round picks, man, they come and go.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're going into 2024. Like, he's probably their left tackle. I mean, Maybe Bakhtiari's back. We'll see with the contract. I doubt it, but we'll see. Beyond that, like, I guess they could spend a high draft pick on a tackle if there's one they like there. But I don't know if they really feel the need to, because one, they have him, and two, they've been so good in the middle rounds finding guys. Like, it kind of feels like this is the Packers' way of, like, we got this guy. He's young. He's our left tackle. Like, we're just going to roll with him.
This is more of what I was kind of talking about, right? Is like, what an advantage for you to have found your starting left tackle who is showing that he belongs in that position in the 7th round. You found him in the 7th round. Well, you got other teams with quarterbacks that are worth protecting going, man, I think we might need to trade up to the top of the draft to get our guy at left tackle. You know what I mean? And it's, if you can find that, I mean, it's kind of the equivalent of what the Niners did with Brock Purdy. Getting him in the 7th round, Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of the draft, they immediately Band-Aid or you know, reverse or like fix the mistake that Trey Lance was, which should be an ugly scar on the face of that organization. And because they were able to hit on Brock Purdy in the 7th round, it's like it never happened. No big deal. Here we are on our way to the Super Bowl. Yeah, so what? We traded the farm to go get this kid at, you know, what, number 2 overall, 3 overall, something like that. He didn't work out. Now we shipped him out. We're still on our way to the Super Bowl. Ask the Bears how that goes. That doesn't go that well for everybody.
Nobody will talk about that because they're in the Super. And if they win the Super Bowl, it'll be forgotten. But they blew a high draft pick and the 3 first-round picks it took to make that trade.
How much better they could be. Holy crap, man.
Yeah. And they fell into it. And the Packers fell into Rasheed Walker. I mean, he's a 7th-round pick.
I'm not going to say the word fell into, because if you are hitting on players in the 7th round, you're doing your homework. You have done your job. And that's where I think, and again, I've made this example before, but there are GMs in this league, or were, I don't think they're there anymore, that spent a 1st-round pick on Johnny Manziel and Tim Tebow. You know what I mean? Like, there was serious evaluation that went into these things, and they whiffed as hard as you can whiff on a decision. Meanwhile, you've got, you know, Goot running the ship over here for this Packers scouting organization, nailing a franchise left tackle in the 7th round. Whew, that's different level, man. That's championship level. I mean, that's what the 49ers are doing, the equivalent of, to get themselves to the Super Bowl now with Brock Purdy at quarterback. And if you can do that again this year, Brian Gutekunst, boy, you might have Pat McAfee write you a written apology for just absolutely nailing your job as to load this talent with team with talent, excuse me. Anyway, so just exciting, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, man. But
no, you're good.
We talk about the things that we're surprised or excited about from this season. I mean, maybe we're a little ahead of ourselves, but it looks like that way. A franchise left tackle in the 7th round, and they found their last one in the 4th round, right? Bakhtiari was a 4th rounder. Meanwhile, in the same year, you find your franchise right tackle in the 4th round. No premium assets used. That, to me, is just like executive of the year, man. If Root doesn't get it, I don't know what the heck the others are doing. I got to find out.
Yeah. What about you? Who was most improved for you this season?
It might be the GM. Seriously, I mean, we went into this season, you know, like I said, with guys like McAfee going, is this guy smart? And now he just like looks like he's been cranking homers, just nothing but homers for the last few years. Let's set that aside, though. If I'm looking at the field, looking, you know, at players, player groups, or coaches, man, it's hard not to say the receivers. After what we saw in 22 and the criticism that group drew, you got rid of the veteran leadership that you had, or veteran presence that you had, and now you're saying we're going to double down on youth, and we believe in what we've got. That's a big bet to make, and they nailed it. Short of Christian Watson being healthy, I don't know that you could have asked for any more out of this group than what you've gotten. I mean, they all look like better versions probably than what you thought they were supposed to. No way somebody thought Dontavian Wicks was going to look this good in year one. I know people were out there saying, hey, this kid looks pretty good, but this good in year one as receiver 5? Get out of here. You know, like, that just to me is wild. And certainly Jason Vrabel, receiver coach, deserves part of the credit for that. And he was one of the ones that I was criticizing last year and earlier this year. I will not forget it. Whatever LaFleur did that week of we're shaking things up, man, that is when all of this turned around. The O-line looked solid after that. The receivers started looking good after that. Jordan Love took off after that. Whatever they did has to stay.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, whatever he did, there was an article, and I think it was Jason Wilde talked to LaFleur, and I think it was between the Dallas and 49ers game, kind of, or maybe it was after the Niners game, but whatever. He was asking, like, what changed? And what he could point to was they stopped letting these young guys have the excuse that you're young guys. It was like, now you got to produce, like, no more excuses, no more we're the youngest team, we're inexperienced, all that. It became like, the hell with that. You're in the NFL now. You're halfway through a season. No more excuses. Let's go. And I think maybe that's what changed, is they got a little harder on them and they stopped, having that built-in mentality of like, wow, there's going to be mistakes because you're young. It became, stop making mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, we need you to produce.
Well, we were watching it too. It was mistakes, and that was the frustrating part. That was the part that it was, it was like, why is this happening? These are simple mistakes. If you didn't get the call, what was the problem with the commute? Was it too loud? If it's too loud, well, let's figure out a better way of getting these things relayed. But seeing those things repeated, it was like they weren't asking each other what the problem was. It was like they were just watching film like, you good? Yep, I'm good. You good? Yep, all right, let's go. So, yeah, it sounds like accountability certainly came into play, and I'm willing to accept that for sure. But, and to me, like, they did everything you could ask for. That's why I'm looking at this group. Short of Christian Watson being healthy, what more could you have asked for from this group? And look, before we get anybody out here ready to throw Christian Watson to the wolves, they've already let go of the strength and conditioning coach, and they've already got Watson down there at UW doing research on how he can fix this stuff. So let's see what the kid can do. He's only in, 2 years into this thing, heading to year 3, before we write him off, because he is a physical freak. We need to really understand this. One thing, was while we're talking about most improved, Christian Watson's stat line certainly didn't improve this season. Real quick aside, see you there, Solo. Thanks for joining us. We'll get to your question. We're going to cover some draft stuff here pretty soon, and pass rushers are definitely a part of it. So hang in there for that segment here in a few minutes. But while we're talking about most improved player, position, coach, whatever, from the 2023 season, Christian Watson's stat line went down for sure. But what we need to look at is the all-22. That man was drawing 3 and 4 DBs in some cases. And we wonder why Jayden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, these guys were just miles wide open, even the tight ends in some cases. It's because Christian Watson scares the hell out of these defenses. The physical tools he has, they are more afraid of that than almost anything else on the field right now. Now, there's a lot of things to be afraid of that Packers offense. There's a whole offseason for defenses to dissect that. But I'm certainly not willing to say that Christian Watson as a player went backwards this season. I think he improved as well. It's just a shame that the hamstring kind of hid that a little bit. But I would say watch out for that kid in year 3. He might be putting the league on notice in year 3 if he can stay healthy. And so we'll round that one out, the most improved with that comment. But I want to have fun with a little question here before we really wrap everything up on the 2023 season.
If the Packers beat the Niners, do they go all the way?
I don't think so.
No? You don't think they take the Lions?
So for me, all the way is winning the whole thing.
Okay.
They beat
fair
the
enough.
Lions and the Chiefs. I don't
You don't
think
think
so.
they beat the Chiefs?
I know they beat the Chiefs. They beat the Lions in Detroit. Like, I can't argue those points. I think it'd be much harder to beat them both the second time.
Fair.
I think the Lions offense would give them a lot of troubles because when they played them on Thanksgiving, they got 3 fumbles. You can't count on that happening again. You can't count on turning them over that much again. And if they couldn't turn the Lions over, I don't think their defense would stop the Lions because they can run the ball and they can pass the ball. They have weapons in the passing game. That would have been tough. Now, could I see them winning that game? Yeah, I could definitely see them. I think it would have just been much tougher than the Thanksgiving game. And then getting through the Lions and playing the Chiefs. I know they beat them at Lambeau, but I wouldn't in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, that's the last person I would want to see them have to play in the Super Bowl is Mahomes.
Is
Like,
that like Sunday Tiger status at this
It
point?
is like
Red
it's just-
shirt, black pants, like ready for business.
yeah, and he's got a defense now,
He does
And
have a
that's-
defense, yeah.
and then, like the offense ain't what it was. It's not explosive, but he's got a defense, and so like he can win a game where yesterday they scored 17 points. Like
Right.
3 years ago, if he scored 17 points, they would have lost
For sure.
most like against a
For
good
sure.
team.
Yeah.
So like that makes it scary. He doesn't have to play out of his mind. He can be almost like, I hate to say it, but he can be like a game manager like that. Just take care of the ball and sustain some drives, score some points, and the defense will take care of the rat. And that's scary. But I just to see him, yeah, I know they beat him, and I know Joe Barry. That's the one guy Joe Barry was good against was Mahomes twice.
Yeah, right.
Shut him down. It was like he can shut down Mahomes, but Tommy DeVito and Bryce Young light him up. It's like, are you kidding me? But no, I wouldn't want to see the Chiefs in the Super Bowl because
Yeah, that's fair. The Chiefs in the
That's-
regular season are not the same. I'll give
it's
you that
different,
much.
man. Yeah.
Ask
So
Josh Allen about that.
I would have loved to. I would have loved to have found out though.
You're right.
Right.
It would have been a great thing to find out.
No, I think it would have been unlikely for them to get through both the Lions and the Chiefs. Maybe the Lions, but that would have been tough too.
It's hard not to think about that because it does seem like a very realistic path. Certainly going through the Lions after you handle them the way you did on Thanksgiving back in November. Man, it's a fun thought. But hey, what ifs are not getting us anywhere right now. What we will say is thank you for that 2023 season, Green Bay Packers. It was a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see how the 2024 season unfolds. And this marks the beginning of the 2024 offseason. We're building this team now. We get to take these youngsters. They get to get in the weight room. They get to get in the film room, spend some time, get better. Jordan Love's going to have them out there in California doing the stuff that we wish Aaron Rodgers would have done at the end of his career. And it's going to be good, man. We're going to have a lot of fun. But let's kick off some draft coverage here with a question that we got from our friend Solo. Do we think that they need pass rushers in this draft? Now, this is an interesting question, Solo. Appreciate you for throwing that at us. For one reason, I guess it's kind of a loaded reason, but pass rushers are deep in this draft. It's a deep class for pass rushers. Goot has been in a pattern of picking from deep, position classes in the draft, right? So even if you look at Jordan Love, a lot of quarterbacks in that draft, man. When you look at the positions he's pulled from, Van Ness was part of a pass rush heavy draft. He's pulling from deep positions. Receivers that he's taken have been part of deep classes. I would not put it past him to take a pass rusher here because that may be who's best player available, and that may be where he's stuck taking, his pick. Do they need pass rushers? No, you don't need pass rushers right now. they're what, 4 or 5 deep. I mean, even we're kind of at the bottom of the depth chart there. You're not, there's a lot more question marks, but you've obviously got Rashawn Gary, you've got Preston Smith still there, you got Luke Van Ness. Enigbari has looked very good as a number 4 at that position. Probably could play higher than that. So anybody you bring in, you got to ask yourself, where are they getting snaps here? If you're bringing in somebody who's better than Van Ness, or if you're trying to predict maybe a Preston Smith exit in the near future, maybe. But I think if they're in a position, and we'll get into this, but this was a great way to lead. This question was a great way to lead into this topic of like, how do we expect Goot to navigate this draft this season? Go ahead, Tim. What
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. For me personally, if they took a pass rusher, I'll never be against that. I think you can always take pass rushers. You always need them. Do they need it? Maybe not. I mean, I would be surprised if they took one in the first round. Somebody that they really like would have to be there for them to do that. But Enigbari is going to be out for probably most of next season, towards ACL in the Dallas game. Like,
wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So he's your third guy or fourth guy, I guess. Not a huge deal, but it's a depth guy. Preston's 31 years old. Got a contract situation. Like they can work it out with him. It's not a terrible contract. And I would be shocked if they let him go. I think he quietly had a real nice season for them.
Yeah, he's still playing really well. And he's a leader in that room.
And he's a leader. But how many more years is he there? He may only be one more year. It might be like a year-to-year thing. Van Ness is there. Rashawn Gary's not obviously just signed the extension. But if you kind of just look at it, like Enigbari, what's he going to be when he comes back from his ACL? And he's kind of just a depth guy. Like I don't see a future like starter there. A nice depth guy potentially, but he's kind of just a depth guy. So yeah, I mean, I could see them taking one, maybe not until the third day or maybe the third round. Yeah. But absolutely. If they took one in the first round again, and I know a lot of people would go nuts because they took Van Ness in the first round last year. If they took one in the first round, I'd be fine with it because I think it's one of the positions like you always want to have a ton of pass rushers because that's what it's about as a defense is getting to the quarterback and affecting all these quarterbacks that are out there, all these good quarterbacks. So I would be fine with it, and I could see them doing it, but probably from the third round on to provide some depth.
Yeah, and another one, the name that's sitting back there for me that's sort of almost a red shirt kind of guy that might have a position in that room is Brenton Cox. He showed some flash in preseason. He's a guy that probably, had he been a little bit better of a character, would have been drafted higher. He's a very interesting one, man, and that's one where it's like, all right, well, if Enigbari's out, you still got – that guy might be somebody who slides in there depending on, how he's doing. We don't know much about where he stands with the team right now, but certainly has the potential to slide in there and be a guy. So I think it's important to pay attention to some of this. What we're going to try to do as we get closer and covering the draft, we're going to dive into all the positions and, kind of pick them apart week by week. But we're going to try to think about players that make sense, players that, the Packers would draft. We're not going to necessarily get as much into who we think is the best here, the best there. We're not making our big boards to figure out who's right about things. We're talking Packers football, right? So we're trying to figure out, all right, where do we think Goot would go here? Where do we think they have these guys slotted? If you look at, like I'd mentioned before, his pattern of drafting from deeper positions or classes, who are those positions this year, right? It's pass rusher is one of them, offensive tackle's another. So we're sitting here talking about potentially have found a franchise left tackle in the 7th round and a franchise right tackle in the 4th round already in the last couple drafts. When that's where you're at, if you come up at the end of the first round, 25, and, the only guys that are first round grade left on your board are tackles, you're probably trying to trade back. I don't think you're using that capital there. But on the same note, if we really stick to best player available, like we've seen Goot say that he does and seems to do, it at that point, I think it's a position premium thing, right? So like you're saying, any time is a good time to take a first-round pass rusher. And I'd say almost the same thing about a tackle, right? Any time's a good time to have high-quality depth from the O-line, whether it's a tackle, a guard. It doesn't matter because we've seen how quickly injuries change that picture. So, yeah, we're going to try to do that. That's how we want to approach things here. But, as we get closer and closer, we've got, let's see here, I think like 3 or 4 episodes before the Combine. So the Combine sneaks up pretty quick. We're going to cover that. We'll pay attention to kind of, who does what at the Combine. And then we'll go from there. But I will say this, again, if we're trying to figure out what are the Packers going to do, what makes most sense for them to do, I would say it doesn't seem like the Combine has ever really made an earth-shattering difference to the players that Goot has drafted. I know he's a Ross guy, right, or a RAS, or however we say that, the athletic score. But he also seems to be he's kind of like Ted Thompson, that he finds a guy like a Devontae Adams out in Fresno State that's, quietly the career leader in receiving at the school, right? Like Greg Jennings, right? He was quietly wasn't he like the NCAA leader in receiving for a while or something like that? Anyway, he finds these guys where it's like, well, that's not the big dude from the SEC that we've all been drooling over. But they end up being excellent athletes, coincidentally, and they've also got the performance on tape. So, those are the kinds of guys that usually Goot's looking for, and we're going to get into some of that position by position. The RAS scores will be out there, so we'll be able to look at those. There's definitely been some tip-offs in the past about who the Packers would take just from looking at those scores. You can kind of figure it out. They don't like unathletic guys.
Nope. Especially at certain positions like receivers, corners. They're going to pass rushers. They have a type. And that test, and like, don't worry about the Combine, like what drills or any, just look at their testing numbers, the final numbers that'll come out. And it's going to be crazy things like a 3-cone drill and a short shot. It's all part of their testing, and they look at the big picture on that, and it's change of direction and different things that they're looking for. But yeah, they want athletes, and they want athletes with good size. But I will add to what you're saying. Pay attention this week is the Senior Bowl down in Mobile. They like Senior Bowl guys. Last year, Musgrave was there, Jayden Reed was there, Carl Brooks was there. They drafted them. I think Grant DeBose was even there. He was a 7th-round pick at receiver. So they do show over time that they heavily scout the Senior Bowl and like seeing players there. You get to see them up close in practice. They get to meet with them.
I'm trying to remember
get to see how their interaction is with coaches and stuff like that. So pay attention to what goes on at the Senior Bowl this week, because the Packers will probably draft somebody that at least maybe more than one guy that's down there. But Senior Bowl, and then when the athletic testing numbers come out is when you can really get a picture and figure out, all right, these guys probably are on the Packers board, and then these guys who score very low in the RAS score at certain positions, just forget about it. Even if we might like them and might like what they did in college, they're not going to touch them. No. They have their standards, they have their types, and they stick to it. And a lot
when
of
they
times,
have deviated, it's only worked a few times. When they've deviated, it's actually hasn't
Jay
gone
Sternberger,
well.
they miss with Amari Rogers. Those are guys they looked outside and they busted.
Exactly. So, I will say Jayden Reed is one that wasn't the best RAS score.
It was close, but yeah, you're right.
Close.
He wasn't top of the line or top of the board,
but
whatever.
Yeah, the guys that stand out at the Senior Bowl, those are very, very much guys that get the attention of this staff. Bo Melton is another one that had a very good Senior Bowl a couple years back.
Yeah.
So, and there's a few guys around the Senior Bowl that are really, really good follows on Twitter. If y'all are on Twitter, we'll tweet a few of them out. We'll try to get you some exposure to these guys, because these are the places where you really can get an idea of who the Packers are looking at and who would be a good fit. So keep an eye out on that kind of stuff, and keep your draft questions coming. We want to answer them. We're not going to claim to be any kind of draft experts, but we are kind of some football nerds over here. We like getting into this stuff and thinking about it, and we've been paying attention to it for a while. And, you guys might like what we think. And if not, you can tell us about it and then tell us what you think. And that's what being a fan's all about. So that's what we're going to keep doing. We're going to have, like I said, we're going to break down position by position leading up to the draft. We might even have to do like a draft live stream or something. That might be kind of fun. But we're going to get into all of them. So if y'all have a position-specific question, definitely shoot it to us on Twitter or here, any of the streams. We'll try to get to them and find you guys some good information on, who's going where. Do you think they'll draft this guy? Why or why not? If you don't know what the RAS score is, we're just over here, saying weird words. Definitely let us know. I think that it's what's the first word of the RAS score?
I believe it's relative athletic score.
Relative, that's right. I keep wanting to say raw athletic score. It's relative athletic score. It's a scale of 1 to 10. It puts these guys up against every guy in their position since 1982, I think, something like that.
Yeah, it goes back over thousands of players.
And so it's kind of exciting when you see a guy that last year I think was Anthony Richardson was literally the number 1 athletic ranked quarterback ever on this scale since I guess 82. So yes, ranked higher than Michael Vick, ranked higher than Cam Newton. So it's stuff like that that's kind of, it's interesting to get into and think about. And, it's based on these things that they've been doing forever, right? Height, weight, speed, strength, all these things. So pretty basic stuff, but still stuff that, you may not have time to look that up in your day-to-day. So that's what we're here for. Me and Tim, we're going to get into this stuff and bring it to you guys, and we're going to have some fun here, and we're essentially going to do Good's job for him. We're going to tell him who to draft by the time we get to the draft. You're all going to know exactly who he should take. Now, if we can just get him to listen, that's what we need. But every year, you seem to come away with some draft crushes, so we'll probably have some. What, you don't think so? He's
plenty good at his job. Don't listen to that.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's fair.
I would love it if he did, but
that's
keep
fair.
doing what
He
we've done the
probably
last couple
shouldn't
years.
listen to Packers Twitter. We've made some pretty outrageous demands.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we're gonna try. And we're gonna have some fun doing it. It is fun when your draft crush gets picked. Christian Watson was one of my draft crushes a couple years ago. So it was kind of fun to see that. And I saw a few people last year that said Carl Brooks was a draft crush. I wish I could remember who. There's a lot of people on Twitter that you talk to, but so there are some people who identify these guys early on, and we're going to try to do that for y'all, and we'll see how it goes. But keep those questions coming for us. Like I said, if you got a position you're interested in, we'll let you know the schedule of how we're going to do that. Maybe next week we'll lay that out. But check us out on all the social medias, the Twitters, all that kind of stuff. That's where we want to have these conversations. We'll be here every Monday night, every week. Tim, you got any final thoughts on this draft process we're about to dive into?
No, other than it's going to come really fast, and it's always interesting on Packers Twitter talking about the draft. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about starting this week, like I said, with the Senior Bowl, and then on into the Combine coming up at I guess the end of February, beginning of March Combine. So it's going to come fast, and I look forward to it. I'll always love talking draft and reading about it, researching it, and trying to figure out who they may take. And once in a while, I'm right. So that's pretty cool too. And, maybe we can figure it out this year before Goody even gets up there to make his picks.
We might. We're going to try to find some names for y'all to watch later in the draft, right? It's easy to say, what's going on in the first round and who's going to be around, maybe even the second round too. But it's really fun when, day 2, day 3, you're watching the, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh rounds, and there's still guys like we're saying right now. There are guys that matter on those days, right? That's where your Zach Tom, your Rasheed Walker came from. And those are looking like franchise guys right now. So one I will give you, though, and this is probably not even a very under-the-radar kind of guy at this point, but the receivers in this class are so impressive. It's a very, very deep class. Xavier Leggett out of South Carolina. I think, keep an eye on that guy. He has a size and a type about him that would actually be a little bit different than the rest of the guys in that room. He's your A.J. Brown type, big-bodied bully receiver. If they're going to add a receiver, I think that's the type of guy they would add. You've got a lot of other skill sets already present in the room, so it's hard to say where they would add a receiver, but right. That's a position that's near and dear to my heart. So that's one that I wanted to call out early on. He looks like an absolute beast, looks like A.J. Brown, and I think it'd be really cool if he ended up on the Packers. But we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of names on this list. So you got anybody that stands out to you out of the gate, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, it's early for me, but there's a couple corners in the first round. The kid Wiggins from Clemson, really like him. The kid, I think his last name's pronounced Rakeshaw, Ennis Rakeshaw from Missouri.
Rakeshaw, yep.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit on the smaller side, so he might have to kick in and play nickel, but that's fine with me because they could use improvements at nickel. So those are a couple of guys just, initially that I like and definitely want to do a little bit more research on, find out about. But yeah, I think there might be some options for him in the first round at cornerback, and it's definitely a position of need.
Yeah, it's another one of those positions that is it's a deep class at corner. There's even some names at safety. It's not as deep, but there's some guys. Yeah. But the corner class looks really deep, and it's a position you can never have too many guys at. And we saw that this year, right? You've got Jair Alexander, you've got Eric Stokes, 2 first-round picks, right? 2 guys that you've seen play very well, both unavailable at a lot of points this season. So you can't have too many good DBs, and I don't think there's ever a wrong time to take a cornerback, even top to bottom. So, yeah, we'll probably spend some extra time on that group, the receiver group, some of these deeper groups. But, yeah, I like those guys too. So, all right. Well, let's see here, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in with us this evening. Is it appropriate to say tune when we're streaming? Are we still tuning in?
Streaming in. Tuning in. I don't know.
Joining us.
Sounds good to me.
Lovely evening. It works for me. We're going to be here every week, y'all. We're going to come back throughout the off season. We're going to, like I said, dive into this draft stuff. We're going to go through the combine, through the draft, and we're going to take you through that ugly desert of an off season after the draft. It'll be we're just going to do it real quick, like a cold ice bath. Get in, get out. And before you know it, we're in training camp and we're staring at preseason games. But in the meantime, spike that like button for us. Subscribe to all the channels, the follows, all the stuff, the Packers Talk YouTube channel. Please check us out there and give us a subscribe. Lots of excellent content coming from the Packers Talk team right now, so check out PackersTalk.com. And check us out next week. We'll be back here 9:30 next Monday. We're going to be getting into some more draft stuff, getting a little bit deeper into things. We'll have no football to react to next week except for a lame duck Pro Bowl, I'm sure.
Yeah, we might have a new defensive coordinator talk.
Yes. We didn't even get into that tonight, man. Look at that. We did cover it extensively on our last live stream. Yes. Tim gave a really good breakdown of a lot of good names out there. We do have a rumored offer for Christian Parker, I believe.
That's but it's kind of that was a rumor. I haven't seen it confirmed by anybody that is a beat writer or anything. So I think it's just a rumor. Could still be him, and at the end of this, maybe he is the guy, but I think it's a little premature right now.
So if you're interested in the topic of defensive coordinators, we will cover it heavily next time. If we have a new one, if we don't, we'll go back over who maybe is still out there floating around, who's rumored to be interviewing and getting an offer and all that good stuff. But yeah, and until then, check out our last live stream. It's available there on Twitter, on our Twitter account at PackWeeklyPod. I refuse to call Twitter X because it sounds like I'm talking about drugs, so I'm just not going to do that. But yeah, check us out there, y'all, and we will again be back this time next week with some good draft coverage and hopefully a new defensive coordinator to talk about. But until then, I will sign us off with a Go Pack Go.